Okay, so this here is my Philodendron Camposportoanum, if that's how you pronounce it. I don't see a lot of information about this plant. I mean, it's not rare, but it doesn't seem like a lot of people have it, and I really don't understand why, because this is a great plant. So today I decided to talk a bit about mine. So this is my massive growing plant. I'm going to insert some B-roll for you. And I have air layered it in the hopes of trimming it down and starting it over again because it's grown too tall for my pole. And in doing that I also wanted to prune it down a bit just so I can take a few cuttings and show you how I root them. This is a very easy plant, it's great for beginners and it sizes up quickly. And not everyone has it, it's not necessarily rare. But because of that, it can be a bit tricky to find it. It's not really an Instagrammable plant, but it's beautiful. So it should be. So first of all, what I'm going to do is just to cut off this top shoot, and we're going to take a look at it. Carefully removing the roots from the pole. It has really thick roots, so it's easy to do. And that's it, you're free. And while I'm here, I'm just going to cut off these two as well. This one is going to revert back to the juvenile state once it starts growing here, and so it's just going to climb up to the top really quickly and then be completely useless, and I have to cut it down even more. So once I'm already started, it's better that I just trim it down as much as I can bother. This plant really climbs on its own, so I don't really need to tie it that much, even though it doesn't have the best of roots. Once it feels securely attached, it's not really going to bother, but there are, further down on this plant, there are some very big aerial roots that goes all the way from here and down to the pot again. So this is the extra cutting that I removed, and I'm going to divide this up into 3 different pieces and then root them, and I'm probably going to use moss. So this is the entirety of the top shoot, and I'm not going to cut this one down more. This is going to be my new plant basically. So let's take a look at the roots. This is very dry, first of all. There's a little bit of moisture left still. Oh, we had some root growth, but it might have dried out again. Okay, so this is the result of roots after about a month being wrapped in moss, and that is not great. And I know that these plants have very good root growth in moss, and it's usually way better than this. So I think this is just down to me forgetting to actually water the moss. But I just wanted to give it a little bit of start before I cut it down. And I guess it's gotten that. Just very carefully gonna peel some of this back because I'm going to plant it in pon. Usually I like to cut away this stem that is absolutely useless, but I wanted to stay on now because I need it to be more secure, and this will help anchor it to the pon in the pot. Okay, so now my plan is to just stick it down into the pot again and then secure it to the pole, and then it can continue growing its best life. And in the beginning I did try to plant them all around the pole, but I don't really like turning the plant because then it's going to grow all gangly. So I've just kept it facing the window the same direction all the time, so this plant in the back has slowly turned to the front and it's not grown a lot because of this as well. So I really don't know what, I think I'm going to put it here, and I will put this one here. Okay, so that looks stupid. That looks stupid, but I'm gonna keep it that way. Okay, so I said I was going to use moss, but I changed my mind. So it's really difficult to get moss at the moment. I've heard some rumors that it's going to be illegal, more or less, to import sphagnum moss to Europe. So wish us luck, Americans. I use these little pots. It would be better to just place them all in one big pot, but I'm going to do it like this because I have a hope of getting rid of them. So this here is just a mix of volcanic rock, I think it's pumice, and some moss and pine bark. And that's it, there is no soil in this. My main plant is in just pon, and that works great for it. This is a plant that I think could grow in concrete, really. It's just that type of plant. Have some of these supports for sticking down cuttings, and honestly they're a bit too short to really work well. I'm gonna use some of those as well, just to try and keep it to stay in its place. And there's that really. Now I'm gonna leave them like this for a couple of weeks. The leaves might die off, I don't really think they will. But I'm gonna leave them for a couple of weeks, and if I don't see anything, I will poke around in the dirt just to see if I can see some new growth. If I do, I'm probably gonna list them for sale or try to give them away. I've never had a cutting of this plant die, and it's always done really well, no matter what substrate I use. Alright, so that's the Philodendron Camposportoanum, the plant that no one knows how to spell, including me. Care-wise for this plant, it does really want all of the sun you can give it, but it's not necessary to make it survive or even thrive for that sake. If you want big mature leaves, sun really is a must. This plant doesn't have mature leaves yet, but it was well on its way before I cut it, so we'll see after this. When it comes to soil, this plant liked a little bit of drainage. It takes the same care as any other pothos plant you might have. I like to use a lot of mineral substrate for mine. I just find it a bit easier and my plants seem to like it. But you can get away with ordinary potting soil with a bit of perlite. This plant has some nice big juicy roots which makes it tolerant to both drought and overwatering, and that leads us on to watering. How often do you need to water this plant? Well, that depends on your environment and on your substrate. If you keep it in soil, then I'd say water it whenever it's dry. I keep mine in mineral, which means it dries up very quickly, and even though I usually forget to water it, it doesn't really complain that much and it just keeps on growing and it's happy whenever I do remember to water it. Fertilizing this plant, it likes it. It likes a bit of food. I usually give it some fertilizer in the water every time I water it, especially during summer. Now I live in a part of the world where we do not have any sunlight during winter. I do not give this plant any extra light at that time. And so I also don't fertilize, just because I don't want to encourage growth in this time of the year. When it comes to humidity, it doesn't really mind getting too little. It's certainly happy with getting more. But in my experience, because this plant grows so fast, it's gonna have problems unrolling the leaves if the humidity drops below 40%. So during winter or just the drier months, you might have to help this plant out a bit. I certainly saw that during winter the leaves got really curled up and some of them never unfurled, and they still haven't to this day. And that's just because of the lack of humidity. It helped though as soon as the sun came out and I started spraying the plant just a little bit. When it comes to pests on this plant, it's a philodendron. You're gonna struggle with the same pests as you have on all other philodendron. You're gonna struggle with spider mites and mealybugs and thrips. I've never had anything but spider mites on this plant, and I'm pretty certain I have spider mites on it now, which is easy to see because on philodendrons they produce a nectar, a sugar that forms on especially the undersides and the stems of the leaves. So when the plant gets sticky, it's usually a sign of aphids. So I know that I have spider mites on some of the plants in my house. This plant though doesn't really show signs of damage. It can handle having pests really well. So I really only see it once it starts creating sugar, and that's when I know I need to treat it. Now the way I usually treat this plant is just with neem oil. I spray it down completely. But if you really want to get rid of spider mites, you need to bathe the plant. If you have this plant yourself, please tell me how you keep it, and thank you for following along. Until next time.